Hi, and welcome to today's episode of the Career Hacking Podcast. My guest today is Anne, and she is from the USA. So this is really exciting because it's another podcast with someone who's outside of the UK. So that's super, super exciting. And we can always hear about, it's great to hear a different accent, and then things about people in other countries is amazing too, and what the career landscape is like there. So just to kick it off, do you want to just give a bit of an introduction about yourself, like where you're from, what it is you're currently doing, any projects you're working on, things like that?
Hi, it's so good to be on here, and it's been great to follow you and your journey, and that you're actually doing something like this to get the word out there about careers. And as you mentioned, I was a recruiter. I was a technical recruiter for over a decade, and I've climbed the corporate ladder. I got the jobs that I really wanted to get throughout my careers after not getting them in the beginning, and then kind of building a strategy on how to get them. And while I was climbing that corporate ladder as a recruiter and as a hiring manager, I've been on both sides of the spectrum. And I understand kind of where the gaps are on both sides. And so from that, during my journey in the corporate landscape, I was always, coaching and helping other the people that would always reach out to me while I was networking, and always ask me for advice on how to fix their resume or how to do their cover letter. And one time the reason I'm doing what I'm doing today is because I got called in from a professor at my college when I was living in New York City. And he asked me to come speak to his students about everything that I've been doing. And that was kind of like my light bulb moment where I was like, wow, because I was on this panel and I had all these people asking me all these questions about how to interview and how to, optimize your LinkedIn and your career resume and all of the things that we use to really highlight our backgrounds. And at that time, I realized, like, wow, I wish I could just do this as a living. How amazing would that be? And so with that, I was always coaching. And ultimately, I left my corporate job and landscape of what I was doing to coach and to really give people that hand when it's really needed. And I found a huge gap, and I wanted to fill that gap. And then we can talk a little bit more about what I've created today, and as a coach, how I'm helping professionals, really kind of get that job that they dream of, but also that fulfilling feeling when they get that job. So I decided to coach, and now I've built a course along with my coaching, and I'm just thriving with that, getting the word out there. And when you give me the opportunity, I'd love to tell you a little more about the about what I actually do today.
That's amazing though. That's great to hear. And I love how passionate you are about it. That's so good. And I feel like it really aligns with what we're trying to talk about on the podcast and things like that, and just getting people more invested in their career and okay, right, I'm more aligned. And I really like that word on how to kind of get further. So I think if we start off a bit by talking about your previous kind of role as a recruiter, things like that, and the way you said about like the corporate and the corporate landscape. How did you feel in that environment? Is there a reason, did you want to maybe leave and create your own space, things like that, or did you feel like you thrived there? How did you find that environment first and foremost?
So that's going to be a different answer for different stages in my career. And the reason I say that is because earlier on in my career, I felt like, I pretty much packed up my bags. I was living in Northern Virginia, just 45 minutes outside of Washington, D.C. And I got a job opportunity that I didn't really know much about. I was working in a corporate job before that, but I did have an interview, and it was more in staffing and recruiting. And I didn't really have much experience, but I was really keen on, being successful and making it big. And so I got a job opportunity in New York and I packed up my bags, and all within 2 weeks, I moved my entire life to the city. And I was like, all right, I'm going to go be really successful in the Big Apple. And, I thought that that's how it was going to go. I was just going to go to New York City and all of a sudden I was going to be super successful. And that's not quite how it went, right? So initially, when I got there, I felt like I was a fish in a shark's mouth, if you will. Okay. That was the initial, when I got there, it was like I didn't really realize how much harder it was going to be. And I thought it was going to be like a walk in the park because I'm going to go and be this big shot in New York City. But through those experiences, I learned actually how tough it really is to, get to where you want to get to. So I started very early on, where my first job that I moved out there for didn't really actually work out. And when it didn't work out, I was sitting there like, what do I do now? I'm in the biggest city in the world. I don't have any resources. All my family, my friends were all in another state, and I had to figure it out all on my own. And I didn't know I had to pay rent. Like, I had just set up my entire life in another state, and I couldn't seem to figure out, like, how am I going to make this work? But I refused to give up and go home. And so that's when I actually, built a very specific and strategic strategy almost a decade ago, where I was like struggling to get a job and I did door to door sales just to make rent happen. And ultimately, the feeling alone was the most, I think, daunting part of the whole thing, because I didn't know who to turn to. And in that moment, I turned to a platform, which I'm sure most of you have all heard of, LinkedIn. And I turned to LinkedIn and I said, well, look at this. This is a platform with so many people on it. And I have no prerequisites or nothing holding me back from really actually reaching out to these people. And so I took that and I put a very strategic, like I said, strategy together. And I started networking and I started sharing my story. And I started to really be authentic about what I knew and what I didn't know, and where I was in my career at the time. And over a decade ago, like, those messages, right, for a long time didn't work. But then when I was very strategic about how I wanted to do that, I started to see what was working and what wasn't working. And with that, I built my strategy and I just kept networking, and I kept, I started reaching out to people at companies that I wanted to be at, and I wanted to, find out from them how they got there. And so in that whole part of my life, I would say it was really tough. But when I started to really figure out how I was going to get that next job, I did everything from, like I said, networking and doing all the things. And when I built that strategy, that's when things really started to move forward. That's when I was getting responses, and I had people, excuse me, I had people creating roles for me and telling me that they would take me to different companies, which actually did end up happening over the course of, that decade. But ultimately, what I realized is that even though that's a proven strategy and it worked over and over and over again, I wanted to take that and enhance it, in maybe take it, where I felt like I really needed the help and I wasn't getting it. So I used my own experience to come up with a program and come up with where I wanted to go in my career and start planning what that was going to look like. And so it really wasn't easy, in the beginning. And as I started to pay more attention to what I wanted and how I wanted to set my goals for my career and strategically start to plan that, the doors started to open. And once I figured out what that missing piece was, I wanted to do something to help other people. I wanted to do something to make sure that all the things that I had to struggle through and go through in one of the toughest city in the world, that I could use my knowledge and my background and things that I've seen work and things that I've seen not work, and be able to coach people and guide them from the angle of a recruiter. So, as you mentioned, as a technical recruiter, when I first got in there, I didn't know much about it, but I had to learn it and I had to upskill continuously in my career to make something out of it. And I wanted to share my insights as a recruiter because I think that a lot of people sitting on the outside don't necessarily know from the lens of a recruiter, don't quite see, what a recruiter is actually doing on the back end and what that process looks like. And I feel that if people are in the know and they're aware of what's happening on the back end and how recruiters think and how recruiters maybe look at your resume, then I think that that information can really truly change how a candidate presents themselves or how a candidate, you know, optimizes their LinkedIn or their cover letter or their resume. And so I really wanted to help people with seeing that light and being able to see it from that side. And as a hiring manager as well, I wanted to be able to share that insight. And so that became my passion. That became everything that made me excited. And I decided that all the advice I was giving to everyone else, that I would take that for myself and follow my dream and follow my career path based on what I truly wanted to do. And what I truly want to do is just genuinely be able to help people and let them know that don't feel undervalued and don't feel alone, because this process can be very lonely. And so, as long as you have somebody pushing you and guiding you, you will get there. It just takes, steps to get there. And so that's where I turned to and, left my corporate job and landscape to help people and understand and take all of my years of experience and expertise to be able to give them a more clear path in their career.
Think that is amazing. And I love the fact that you've taken everything that you've learned from being a recruiter and being in that landscape and flipped it on its head to say, okay, well, I've seen the other side. So that makes you the most qualified person, I think, to kind of say to people, this is how to do things a certain way because in fact, what people are looking for. So I think it really, really does help because you can feel in the dark. Like a lot of people I speak to, if they're looking for another job, if they're wanting to get into networking, if they're just not sure where to start, my first answer and always my go-to is LinkedIn. It's amazing. It helped me so much, as in finding networking events and meeting new people and everything like that. It was absolutely amazing. Um, but I think it's so important. It's such a valuable tool. But when you do create that LinkedIn profile, you kind of you can fill out the basics, almost like a CV that everyone can see. It's going to be okay. Yeah, I did this between these years. I have a few of these skills. But like you said, the key is the optimization. That is how people will find you because you need that online presence now because it's not as easy as obviously in-person networking is amazing and I don't think anything will replace it. But if you're
Mhm.
looking for a job, it's not just going to be, okay, I'm filling out this job application, I want this job. It doesn't work like that. It's going to ask, have you got a LinkedIn? Can we have the website? They want to have a look at that. And then,
Mhm.
if you want people to come to you, if you're in a specific role, you've got a skill set where you might be approached. So, like one of my previous guests with Ermi, she's in compliance and finance. Those are very, I think, especially compliance, very high demand jobs because there's not a lot of people. So you need to kind of preface that in the same way in your LinkedIn. So put things like keywords, what recruiters will be searching for when they're like, I want people with these key skills. But I
Mhm.
think not enough people kind of push that forward. And it's almost like personal branding. Would you agree? It's like marketing yourself the right way. to have those opportunities?
On that topic, when one of the most important things is when you ask somebody, right, when you say, what's the most important thing in your life? And usually the response is my family, right? And that's usually the first response. I mean, I ask my clients this all the time. What's the most important thing in your life? And they say, well, my family. And then when you ask them, what's the second most important thing in your life? Usually the response is my career or my job, how I make my income. And in my mind, when I start to think about that, and when you said personal branding and being able to stand out in this competitive job market, when I think about how much people value their careers and their jobs, I don't feel that maybe that guidance or that effort is there. In college, they teach you how to learn, how to do math, how to do English, but there's groups that you can go to, but there's nobody really giving you that insight, nobody really showing you, well, when you need to prepare for your career planning, this is how you should do it. And it changes because once you get into the corporate landscape, it might not be the same thing that you learned in college, or, how they're positioning you, because in real life, it really starts to become real. And a lot of people do feel stuck. And when you ask them if it's that important, right, they don't really quite know what direction to take, rightfully so, because it's something they're not experts in. And so whenever you see somebody who's transitioning into a new job, or whenever you see somebody who is stagnant in their current job and wanting to go to that next step, the first thing they do is they say, well, I'm looking for a new job, I want to find a new thing. And they'll come to their resume, they'll update their resume, and then boom, they start applying to all these jobs. And in my mind, I wanted to be able to give people a one-stop shop where it was everything. So when you want to start looking for a job, I think you need to go a couple steps back when it comes to just updating your resume and start applying. I think customizing your applications are such a big part of searching for a job. And that's something a lot of people don't necessarily maybe pay attention to, or go back and assess their skills to see how they've changed or how they've acquired new skills. They just go, back to updating their resume and start applying, which of course works, right? But I think that there's a more strategic way of doing it. And so when you talked about branding yourself and being able to stand out, some of those things, you can actually do if you're aware yourself, probably a lot more confidently, if you've kind of done your own research and assessed your own self, to then be sure to know what's happening around you. And so I think standing out in a competitive market, and I've done 3 or 4 applicant tracking implementations in my career, and I can tell you that those keywords are important. And it's because there's so many resumes that come in that recruiters need to find a way to narrow down that search on their side as well. And so I think that if people knew how to stand out and how to be competitive in the market a little bit better and more educated on that, then I think it would be a lot more easier for people to actually reach their career goals.
You explained that so well, especially with the career planning. I think so many people are like, I have this time, this effort I want to put into my career, but they kind of just don't know where to go. And also, if you're applying for jobs, I feel like even though it's not a massive task, it feels like it is to customize each CV because of how many job applications you're sending out. But
Mm-hmm.
in the actual stage of you're going to be applying anyway, and you're probably going to write a cover letter, if you customize your CV and just kind of put forward those skills that are relevant for that specific job or that company, and do a bit of research, it will take a few extra minutes. It might take 10, it might take 20, but it's so worth it considering how long it's probably going to take you to apply anyway. So it's kind of like if you do it right the first time, you've got a better chance. And I do agree as well about making yourself stand out. So I think I have a weird example with this, but thinking back, I'm like, okay, that might be why. So when I was at my previous company, before where I am now, I did take a few months to try and find, right, I need to find the right role. I had a few holidays planned, it was great, but I had time to apply to jobs. And I kind of wanted to change a bit of the career path as well. So when I was applying, I was quite lucky. I got a lot of interviews, and I like to think it's because I've been on LinkedIn, I do my networking, and I optimized my CV as much as I could. But there's one thing, and every time I went into an interview, people brought it up, and I think that's why they wanted to speak to me. Now, it's a very, very weird thing, but I have a degree, and it's very unusual. So, my kind of sector I've always worked in has been fintech, compliance, finance. But
Mhm.
I have a degree in religious studies, so it's very different. And I think because I always had like the relevant experience and I had the skill set they were looking for, but there was just this thing where they must have had a look and thought, okay, yeah, that degree's there, and they're gonna have a look at it. But they were like, and I put like the name of my dissertation, which again is even more unique. And every time I went for an interview, I'm like, did I get this interview just so you could kind of ask me what on earth is this? And they're like, yeah. And then I actually end up getting job offers just because of that. Like, I always thought my degree would not help me, and it's actually opposite. It really has.
Oh my God, that's awesome. You see, it's that it's that thing that made you, stand out. It was whatever that thing is. And once I was told that my CV was, you look at it and it was telling a story. And that's sometimes what I advise my clients to do as well, is to think about their own story and think about how they want to, you know, tell people about that story as a first impression without them even being seen, right? So your first impression is usually, of course, your material that you submit, right? Your CV, your LinkedIn. That's really the first point of contact with a company that you're having. And so the more customized to the job and the company, then it's an attractive thing to kind of look at. And like you said, it was something to talk about. They're like, wow, well, this is your experience, but your degree is in this. I'd really love to hear about how you got into this, right? And it's like you can look at your CV and probably tell that there's some sort of a story, but that's your story and people wanted to know it and they wanted to share. So I think that's amazing, because as much as you might think that recruiters aren't looking at everything on the resume, yes, they are skimming through it. They're not reading line, every single word, but they have an eye for those things, and they have an eye to kind of see what's standing out and what's not. At least, like, that's what they look for, right? And so something like that is like, okay, well, this, even if this job requires a degree and this person doesn't necessarily have that exact fintech, coming out of finance background degree, they have the experience, and that's what counts. And it's how you were presenting yourself where you were successful in getting those interviews. So that's amazing.
Yeah, it definitely was. And I think it helps that I've kind of jumped around a bit. So, a big topic I think at the moment to talk about is things like with people, especially who maybe have just come out of uni, and like job hopping, where you're kind of moving around quite quickly, and whether is that something that is a good or a bad thing. Now, I think it varies massively depending on your career path, because some of them, like if you're going to be an accountant or a lawyer or anything like that, even a doctor, it is still very set. There are certain exams and there's a certain path you have to follow. But
Hmm.
I think everything else is more of a grey area now, in that my experience is very varied. I've worked retail jobs, I got a degree, I then worked in a startup company which was in fintech, again, very specific. And working in a startup company, I think it has a lot of skills that you wouldn't get anywhere else. And
Hmm.
then now I work for a bigger corporation, and it's more just in, it's in tech still, but it's more finance tech combination. So because I kind of feel like I'm hoarding all these skills, I'm kind of getting them and I'm listing them on my LinkedIn and my CV. I think a lot of other people might be in the same boat. They're jumping around from job to job. So, do you think that's a good thing that so long as you can, like you said, tell that story? But do you think that's a good thing for people to jump around and things like that?
So I will give you examples on what my thought process is when it comes to gaps on your resume. And when you talk about story, there is a story for everyone. Everyone's resume and everyone's story is going to be different. And what's right and what's wrong. There's no right or wrong because it's yours, right? So, first and foremost, if you had to, for whatever reason, jump around, I don't know this yet because I'm not quite sure why you had to jump around, right? It could be for reasons that are, was your life was just miserable at a job and you wanted to get out of it. But I don't know that because all I'm seeing is the timeline as a recruiter, right? So it's actually how you position, what you want to say about yourself. And I'll give you an example here and why I created what I created. So if you go to the grocery store, for example, and you have something in mind that you want to cook when you get home, if you bring a list with you, you'll probably get through the grocery store much quicker, pick up all the items that you know you need, and then you'll go back to your kitchen and you'll start cooking right away. Whereas let's say you know what you want to make, you kind of have an idea, but you don't make a list and you go to the grocery store and you walk around, you're probably going to look at a few things. You won't be 100% like this is exactly what I need. You might, wander, you might pick up things you need, you might not need. So if you put your career in that same boat, if you will, right? It's in my mind the same thing. Like if and this is where I wanted to fill that gap, and this is where I created my course, because I feel that gaps and things will always happen, right? Life is going to happen and you can't change what's going to happen in the future. But what you can do is you can plan for it. And so planning for it, meaning in my course, what I offer is that if you can start to assess your skills early on in your career and start to build a roadmap early on in your career. So, like you said, people coming out of university and really not knowing where they want to go, what direction to take, that I feel they need guidance, right? And in my course, what I do is I have my clients go through a thorough skills assessment. They go through that assessment to actually sit down, and I've enhanced all of this with artificial intelligence. So we do a lot of this much quicker than we would traditionally. So let's say you're applying to many applications, it's a much faster way, and I'll get into that. But the first thing that's important to understand is yourself and your skills and what your skills are actually worth and what they're valued at in the job market, right? If you're aware of some of, let's say it's your passion, okay, and you want to do something, but you're not quite sure how much are you going to really make if that's what you end up doing. So it all starts with assessing yourself. And in my course, I take them with assessing themselves to then analyzing the job market and what's in demand and what skills do you need to be able to, that's where you understand how can you upskill, because when you're taking your current skills and you're analyzing them with the market and the market demands, and you're analyzing what the market is looking like for your particular skills, then you can plan that much more, you know you can plan accordingly, right? So you are going to then say, well, if I'm a project manager and PMP certification is going to be the most in demand thing, and I can, if I get that skill or if I get that certification, my value in the market is going to be double what it is right now, right? But you can't do that if you don't know if you don't know what the demands are and what skills you need or you don't need. So I think, to your point, the reason I did that is skills assessment, market analysis, it all goes hand in hand. It goes step by step. And then you want to really think about, well, what part of your career path do you want to take after that? So if you've assessed it, then you build goals against those, right? So you want to assess yourself, do the market analysis, build goals according to those findings, and then from there you actually start to narrow down the companies and the jobs that you want to be in, and you feel so much more confident doing that. And then I really kind of go into teaching you how to network, authentically network within those organizations and industries, depending on which ones where you truly will feel fulfilled and want to be, and are still earning, what you want to earn. And it goes into networking, and then it goes into interviewing, and then it goes into negotiation. And so I teach all of that as a full thing, because it all starts with what you know about yourself and how you assess your skills, and then how you actually get that job, that dream job, that fulfilling job. And it's all of these steps. And I think that it's important to take those steps, and those gaps are when you talk about the gaps in your resume, when you start to tell your story and you've put so much focus on your career and how you present yourself, that I don't see it's not a bad thing or a good thing that you have gaps. Yes, gaps are looked at, when a recruiter looks at it, they're like, oh, they've been out of a job market for so and so time. I wonder why. It is a wonder why, but it doesn't necessarily take you out of the running. It's not a bad thing. It could be your reason. But let's say in that portion of your resume, you're able to kind of convey your story or convey why there might be a gap, right? So it's not a bad or a good thing. I think that it all needs to be looked at as more, um like, it needs to be planned for. And if you're planning early on, then even when you have those gaps, you can actually tell your story so much more confidently and say, well, I took this break because I wanted to explore X, Y, and Z, or I took this break because I had to for my kids, or whatever that is. Life happens, and recruiters and hiring managers understand that. And as long as you can highlight that, and as long as you can understand how to convey your message, then there's nothing wrong with those gaps. It's just about how you communicate them to the hiring team.
That's a really good way to kind of explain it as well, is that I think life does happen, and that it's nice to know as well that things are taken into account, because I think a lot of people will have maybe a career break, or like I said, out of a certain job market for a time if they had decided I wanted to pursue this interest instead, and then they might come back, things like that. So I suppose, yeah, things can change, and people's mindsets can, I mean, preferences as well, things like that. I also really, really liked what you mentioned about certain companies. So it's not just pinpointing, okay, these are the skills or these are the jobs or even the salary that you want. It's the company. And I think that's so important. I feel like I learned that quite early on, and I've been lucky that, especially the two companies I've worked for since I've left university, I've loved both of them. So I'm currently working for a larger corporation right now, and they're amazing. They're really supportive of everything, including podcasting. I do interviews like at work, and I interview other people in different departments and say, okay, this is what they do. So I can't believe my company's doing that. It's amazing. And
That's
then
awesome.
I know, how cool. I was just like, oh, I do podcasting. They're like, do you want to do like an interview? Um, just kind of for everyone. I'm like, yeah, that'd be amazing. So they've supported that. And then obviously with a lot of other things, they offer so many benefits, and I feel really valued and looked after. And then the other company I worked at, even though it was a startup, I did feel like it was unlike anywhere I've worked before. And I think anywhere I'll work again, because it was very much like it was a family, and that is when I fully understood, okay, this is a culture, and that is so important for businesses, that they kind of have that culture, they protect it while they grow, and that
Mhm.
they kind of almost hire the right people that will fit into the culture, and that I think it's one of the most tricky things because it's a balance. You'll have so many personalities and they're going to clash. But
Mm-hmm.
it's just making sure that that's kind of somewhere people want to work and that you're an attractive company that a lot of people will come to. So you can select the best talent and the best employees. But I really like that because I think that's such an important point is it's not just about a salary or a job title, it's about the company itself because you are going to be there for a long time, probably,
Mm-hmm.
or at least a year, 6 months, even at the shortest. But you're going to be there and you want to feel looked after. You want to feel like you've got stability, everything like that.
If you actually start to, like, let's say you have a dream company or a dream job or at that company, right? You are now more excited to learn about that company. You want to know what the culture is like. You want to know the ins and outs of that company because you're like, oh, I wish I could work there. And that's what the culture is like. And that's what they're doing over there. And so you almost consume yourself into that, not to the point where you're like, but then that confidence, let's say you get an interview at that company, right? You're now walking in knowing so much about that company that people there are like, wow, you truly genuinely care about the culture, you care about being here, and you actually, have done your research. And that's why it's so important to build a career roadmap, because all of these things are a part of it. And it's important to understand what you want and what companies you actually truly want to be in, because you're directing this whole thing, right? You're assessing and saying what it is that you want. Of course, it's always great to have that guidance, but if you're really keen on planning your future, then I think that those gaps come in and out, and it's as simple as going back to your career roadmap and updating it and changing it and being acquainted with it and looking at it every now and then and making changes to it and realizing that it's an ongoing consistent thing. And you'll actually eliminate a lot of those gaps if you follow a plan, because now you're not really kind of thinking about, well, how do I get here? What do I do? You're actually like, this is my goal. Here's what I want. Here's what would make me happy. Here's what would make me fulfilled. And then you're targeting how to get there versus, not knowing. Then those gaps do fall into place because you're confused, you're unsure, you don't know if this is something you love or you want to do. But if you really sit down with yourself and you really think about what you truly want early on and how you can get there, then that's actually going to help a lot of your career. It's going to help you so much in the long haul, because 10, 15, 20 years, I mean, it's important enough to people, like they say, right, to put that effort in. And that's why I created my program, because if you put that effort in one time, you get that guidance one time. It's as simple as just going back to it and updating it and staying consistent with it, because it's going to come to a point in where we are today in the job market that if you're not standing out in this digital space, if you're not doing something different, if you're not doing something that's outside of the box, you might have all the skills, you might have all of them and more, but it's all about how are you going to get seen? How are you going to stand out? And so it's a really important piece, is for people to really think about career planning and how that is going to affect 5, 10, 15 years from now.
I think that's so valuable to say. Like it is planning for the future as well. Even if you don't know what you're going to do, it's like, well, am I still getting transferable skills? Am I still getting things that would be useful for that later on?
Mm-hmm.
And I really agree with what you were saying about like with that career roadmap and stuff and planning it out and like where am I going to go? And I think that's so valuable because a lot of people, like even myself included, I don't know what it is that I want to do in the future. And I think to an extent that's okay, but it is just knowing, okay, but the things I'm doing now, is it still valuable? Is it still useful? Like, can I then, again, back to personal branding marketing, can I market this later on and say, well, I decided to do this and I worked for this company because I loved it and I enjoyed it and whatever, but can I still use those skills later on
Mhm.
and things. And then again, it's something different because if you in the future go for a job and they're like, well, why did you work for this company? You can just say, because I love them and because I love the culture, everything like that.
Yeah.
I do have a question as well. So, with you being a career coach, which is a really, really fascinating job, really interesting to hear about, what does a day in your life look like then when you're doing that?
So, a day in my life is basically I've created my course already. So I've created a 12-week program, which includes everything I talked about here today, but I've actually enhanced that with artificial intelligence, meaning if you want to be able to customize your applications and all of your career material, I walk you through a 12-week program where you're building a career roadmap. So, all the things that I talk about, from skills assessment to your market analysis to how to interview, how to negotiate, how to land that job. And so, I've taken all of that and I've put it into a recording. And the reason I did that is because I come in, my day, my life is basically having to take not only calls for people who want to join the program and join me with my guidance, because what I do is if you sign up with me, you get access to my 12-week course. Plus, you get me as like a weekly coach. So basically, what I usually do, and right now I'm not doing group coaching, I'm doing one on one coaching. So they get access to the course, and so they go week by week by week, but then I meet with them on a weekly basis to guide them, to review their work. So we're doing, optimizing your LinkedIn page, for example, or your CV, or all of those things. So any questions that they have. So usually I have weekly calls with my clients where I'm coaching them on the stuff that they've already seen, or all the 12 weeks that they're doing my course. And then aside from that, my life is filled with taking new calls all the time and doing discovery calls with people on how to, understand what their market value is currently. So I'm taking calls. I've done this like free thing where um, I'm, taking people who are interested in knowing what their market value is, and I'm showing them a high level view of that, in case they were wondering, right? Because a lot of people, I don't think, like I was talking about before, look at what their skills are valued at, and if they're underpaid or if they're paid fairly. And so I've been taking some of those discovery calls, and those discovery calls turn into career strategy calls. And so then from there, my life is all about being on on Zoom with either clients who need me for my expertise as they're going through my course, or then for people who are wanting to learn more and join my program and my coaching services. That's basically my life. It's all day, all night. It's all I work on. It's what I'm passionate about. And I love it, because I know and I feel so confident, and I've been able to guarantee and see people go from, you know, their $100,000 jobs to 140 or 150. It's because of all being aware and how to plan forward. Like you said, it's okay to not always plan everything. But when it comes to your career, and if you really do focus on planning it out, I guarantee that your results will come with that. And so I, really value all my clients, and and it's everything is very personalized because everybody's careers are different. So I take the time to really work with my clients to get them that 20 to 30% increase. And it all starts with being aware and how they want to upskill and how they really want to reach those goals. And so my life is pretty much consumed. I have a 1 year old and a 2 year old, and outside of that, I am on calls, and I am coaching one on one, and I am just walking people through this intensive course, and I tell people all the time that it's for people who aren't just looking for jobs. It's for people who genuinely want to put in the work towards their career, because it's not just me and what I'm telling you, it's actually the work that you're going to end up doing. And my course is very interactive. So it's modules and guides, and then it's exercises. So I actually have you do assignments and things to build that career roadmap. So by the end of the 12 weeks, you have something tangible to be able to walk away with and say, this is where I'm going to go, from here on out. And so that's my life. And I love every minute about it, because I get to share all of these cool insights from my corporate journey, and being a technical recruiter and being a hiring manager and telling people things that are eye-opening that they probably never would have heard is like so fun for me, because I get to tell them things that they're like, wow, I didn't know that, and if I known that, I probably would have done things differently. And so it's great to give them that insight and be able to really root for people on the outside as candidates, to tell them, this is, if you do it this way, if you follow these steps, you can absolutely get there. And I have all of that experience and such fun stories to be able to share and engage with people and network with people all the time, like yourself. I love networking and just getting to know people and know their stories and how we can help each other in this world. And so that's what I do, and that's what I enjoy, and that's my life.
Oh, that's amazing to hear. And I love the fact as well you're so passionate about kind of making people be more independent and taking control of their career and realizing actually it's not just, okay, which job do I apply for and kind of whichever one I get and I like the best, I'm going to go for that. It's like there's a lot more thought to it, and people are taking back control with your help of, okay, this is what I want to do with my career, or this goal, and you're helping them achieve that. And like I said, networking is amazing, and that's how I met you online. And it was really lovely to network with you. And oh my goodness, was it lovely to chat with you. And I think you've given everyone who's listening so many amazing tips. Like, even just myself with listening, I'm like, this is great. But it's so good because I think you've given such tangible kind of advice to take away and be like, right, this is a few things that you can look at. And obviously, if anyone's interested, which I'm sure they will be, then I'll provide them links and they can always reach out to you and say, okay, I need some more help with this. Or if they're like, yeah, that sounds amazing with this roadmap, then they can always reach out to you. So that would be absolutely amazing. But yeah, thank you so much for your time. Is there anything else you want to add quickly, like before we wrap up, anything like that?
I just want to say this was so amazing. I haven't done one of these before. And so you are actually my first podcast appearance, if you will. And I've just enjoyed it so much because I love talking about it and talking to people who are also, really out there getting this point across about how important your career is and networking. And, I'm so glad that you and I connected. And I would love for people who want, any kind of, if I can be of any kind of help to people listening, please don't, feel free to reach out. I have a weekly career newsletter. I can share the links with you there. And I provide weekly updates for people who just want to know what's going on. And so, I'd be happy to talk to people who are interested in creating a roadmap. And we do all of this and we have fun with it. And it's all enhanced, and it's a lot, it's all edgy and innovative, and it's fun. So I'd love to, have anybody that's interested in talking to me through this. And it's just been so wonderful to connect with you and hear your side of things. And I'm glad that I was able to help. And if there are more tips that I can share, I'd be happy to. But it's been such an honor.
Oh, well, thank you. And that's amazing to hear. But yeah, I'm so glad that this was your first podcast episode. And I hope that you get to do more in the future. And like, I'd be happy to have you on for another episode. It was amazing. But yeah, thank you to everyone who's listened. And this is going to be available on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple. Because recently we're now on Apple. So yeah, you can listen to this everywhere. And if you have any questions, then just reach out to Anum. I'll make sure all the links are on Instagram and everywhere so you can reach out to her there.